Welcome back to the ACE-CPT exam prep series. This is lesson 12. We're in the domain of program design and implementation, and this is chapter 12 of 18, the ACE IFT Model in Practice. This lesson is a little different from the ones before it. We're not introducing new material. Instead, we're pulling together everything from lessons 5 through 11, investigation, assessment, and placement, and applying it to real client case studies. Think of this as the synthesis chapter, the one where all those separate pieces finally click together into a full working program. Let's look at what you'll be able to do by the end of this lesson. There are 4 objectives. First, you'll be able to walk a client all the way from investigation through a finished 2-track program, meaning both the cardio track and the muscular training track. Second, you'll identify the common synthesis mistakes trainers make when they try to put all this together. Third, you'll explain what happens after a program is actually designed, because the work doesn't stop once you hand over a plan. And fourth, you'll recognize why ACE's real exam leans so heavily on scenario-based questions. Keep that last one in mind. It's exactly what this lesson is built to prepare you for. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture, synthesizing lessons 5 through 11 into one coherent process. There are 3 ideas to hold on to here. First, independent placement. A client's cardiorespiratory training phase and their muscular training phase are decided independently of each other, each one based on its own set of findings, not on some assumption that they have to match. Second, avoid the common mistakes. Don't force matched phases just because it feels tidy. Don't default to a generic template, and don't skip reassessment along the way. And third, progress and reassess. Progression follows the double progressive protocol, alongside the 10% rule, and it's paired with periodic reassessment to confirm the client is actually ready to move forward. Now let's walk through a full case study, stage by stage, so you can see this whole process play out with one real client. Investigation comes first. Rapport building, a PAR-Q plus intake with no red flags, and a SMART goal set using the GROW framework. Next, the functional assessment turns up an anterior pelvic tilt, forward head posture, knee valgus, and poor TVA engagement. That's the transverse abdominis, the deep core muscle. The physiological assessment shows normal vitals, but this client isn't ready yet for VT1 or VT2 testing, so a push-up test is used as the baseline instead. Given those postural and core findings, muscular placement starts in functional training. And because this client hasn't been exercising consistently, cardio placement starts in base training. Notice how each track was decided on its own evidence. That's the independent placement principle from the last slide in action. Here's a second client, and this one is important because it shows you where placements can diverge in a way that might surprise you. This client is a former college soccer player, deconditioned now, but with clean movement screens thanks to years of athletic training. So where does muscular training start? In movement training, not functional training, because the movement quality is already there. But cardiorespiratory training still starts in base training. Why the difference? Because current conditioning is what drives that placement, not athletic history. This client's body remembers how to move well, but their cardiovascular system isn't currently conditioned, and the IFT model cares about where the client is right now, not where they used to be. Let's talk about the mistakes trainers commonly make when they try to pull all of this together, because the exam loves to test exactly these traps. First, forcing matched phases. Assuming a client has to be in, say, phase 1 of everything, across the board, when really each component stands on its own findings. Second, defaulting to a template, reaching for a generic one-size-fits-all program instead of letting this specific client's assessment data actually drive the plan. And third, skipping reassessment, treating that initial assessment as a one-time event, instead of what it really is, a recurring checkpoint you return to again and again as the client changes. Keep these 3 in your back pocket. They show up constantly in scenario-based exam questions. Designing the program isn't the finish line, it's just the starting point. Let's look at what comes next. Resistance training progresses using the double progressive protocol, which you covered in earlier lessons. Cardiorespiratory training progresses using the 10% rule, gradually increasing volume without overloading the client too quickly. And periodically, the original assessments get repeated. That's a key detail. Genuine, measurable improvement is what justifies moving a client into the next phase, not just the fact that time has passed. Here's why this matters for the exam. ACE's real test leans heavily on scenario-based questions, and synthesizing everything from lessons 5 through 11 into one coherent answer is exactly what those questions are designed to measure. Let's test this with a practice question. A new client's postural assessment shows an anterior pelvic tilt and poor TVA engagement. Which muscular training phase should they most likely start in? Your options are load and speed training, movement training, functional training, or performance training. Take a moment to think it through. The correct answer is functional training. Here's why. Findings like an anterior pelvic tilt and poor TVA engagement point to underlying stability and mobility deficits, and those need to be addressed first before a client can safely progress into more dynamic movement or loading phases. Here's your second practice question. A deconditioned client who hasn't been exercising consistently should most likely start cardiorespiratory training in which phase? Your options are performance training, fitness training, base training, or zone 3 interval training. Take a moment to think it through. The correct answer is base training. Here's why. A client who isn't yet exercising consistently needs to start by building duration and frequency within zone 1, which is exactly what base training focuses on, before any higher intensity work makes sense. Let's recap the key takeaways from this lesson. A client's cardio and muscular training phases are decided independently, each one based on its own findings, not forced to match. The common mistakes to avoid are forcing matched phases, defaulting to a generic template, and skipping ongoing reassessment. Progression relies on the double progressive protocol for resistance training and the 10% rule for cardio, backed up by repeated assessment over time. And remember, ACE's real exam leans heavily on scenario-based questions, which is exactly the synthesis skill this chapter was built to give you. Congratulations! That's the entire highest-weighted domain on the exam complete. Program design and implementation, worth 31% of the test. That's a huge milestone in your prep. From here, we circle back to chapters 1 through 4, and then move on through chapters 13 to 18 to round out the rest of the material. Up next is chapter 13 of 18. You can find the full course anytime at theflexcult.com/certifications/ACE-CPT. See you in the next lesson.